disability, find something you love, because it's pretty hard to, I think, for anybody to like kind of double down and find what you're passionate about, especially if you have a disability. And don't let your disability determine what you're going to do in life.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode. We are excited to provide a two-part series. If you guys are familiar with this podcast or know anything about me, I'm a huge advocate for individuals with disabilities. Before we get into the topic, though, let's introduce our guests to the side of us.
Hi.
Go ahead. Nah, you go.
Hi. So my name's Alberto Sedillo. I known Mario for a while now. We play soccer together, and we're pretty good friends. He invited me to a podcast, so thank you, Mario, for inviting me.
Hi guys, my name is Robin. It's a pleasure to be here, Mario. I've actually known Alberto since probably 2014, freshman year of college. So we've been friends for a very long time. So yeah, excited to be here and ready for these questions to be thrown at me, I guess.
That's my favorite thing when we're given a question. With that being said, what comes to mind when we hear the word disability? Do any of you guys want to take the first question?
You want to go first, Robin, or should I go first?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, so when I hear disability, like it impairs, it's like an impairment of like your, like what the dictionary says is like it's an impairment of your, I think it says movement senses. But when I really think, when I think about disability, I feel like it's like people see it as a negative concept. Like it says disability, so it's like not being able to do things, So I don't know when you want to go,
For me, I kind of have to bounce off of Alberto here.
Yeah.
I feel like people tend to label disability as not being able to do something cognitive or physical.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's disability is a bit different. First of all, you can't really see someone's disability without getting to know the person, because somebody could have a disability or be off spectrum, and you don't even know about it because every case is different from person to person. So you just kind of have to keep in mind of how someone acts. And then if you're okay bringing up that uncomfortable question, like, hey, I've noticed like you walk funny, or like you act a certain way and you have a disability, some people might get offended off of it, and some people might not be able to want to speak about it. So I think the definition varies to person. I think not being able to do something that a normal person does is what people qualify as a disability, if you're able to ask a random person on the street.
That's a big one, Robin. You mentioned that a lot of times we see someone on the streets, or just someone in general, that you can see they're a little quirky, and we're all curious, and we want to know. We're curious, and we want to know, like, do they have something that's holding them back? What's going on? So sometimes the curiosity gets the best of us, and we ask. Unfortunately, for a lot of us personally, when we have a disability, whether physical or cognitive, it's personal. So some of us may get taken back. Like I remember meeting people who are deaf. That's the one thing. That's one of the many things you don't do to individuals who are deaf. When you see sign language, you don't ask that they're deaf. You get to sign with them, and then eventually, when you want to know like why they know sign language, you're like, oh, do you have family that are deaf? You don't really specify, or you don't ask to them. You kind of want to go around that. Like, don't label the person with the disability, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree what you're saying, because for me, I have a disability. I have cerebral palsy, so it's a motor. So it's like cognitive skills and physical. It's a physical disability, where it's like your brain's not mentally developed, or your certain parts of your limbs are not developed. That disability varies case by case. For my story, I was born 2 pounds 3 months early, so I'm only a 6-month baby, and I had to stay in the hospital for an extra 3 months. So like from April to July when I was born, I had to stay in the hospital. So I've been told. So they always do tests and stuff like that. To go in deeper, when I was a kid, I was always going to physical therapy to get certain limbs stretched out. I have very tight hamstrings on my left side. My left side of my body is not as flexible as my right side, or there's certain things that I'm not good with my left hand. It's like working out. If you don't work out one side of both sides of your body evenly, obviously one side's going to be weaker. For me, that is more challenging. If one side is not as good as the other side, it tends to be more challenging for people who have cerebral palsy. There's also cases where you see people on a wheelchair and they can't speak at all. So that disability, cerebral palsy, varies case by case. So it could be very detrimental where you can't hear your child speak or walk or do the simple things like a normal human being could be, or it could be my situation where you're very lucky and you can still walk, talk, and do like a normal day-to-day life, but I'll still have certain struggles that other people who are able to do it at a certain level, while my energy is kind of just like, it could be weak at one point and then good at other points, and then depending on an activity. So all disabilities vary from case to case.
Definitely. And it's interesting too. I met a couple of friends, and even myself, with ADD and autism. A lot of disabilities, many disability people that have disabilities, it's not just one. Usually people who have like ADD or ADHD, occasionally they have anxiety, they have depression. Individuals who, I guess with cerebral palsy, I didn't know that it was both physical and a cognitive disability. So there's a lot of, it's like how y'all mentioned, each disability varies case by case. With that being said, what's the difference between handling someone who has a cognitive disability than handling someone with a physical disability?
I think for cognitive, you kind of have to be a little bit more patient and understand the point of view of the person who's disabled. And I think it can go the same way for being someone who has a physical disability. You just have to understand the situation and understand this person can do this good, and so there's going to be things or activities where they won't be able to walk as good or as professional as like a regular person. And then mentally they might be sent back into special ed classes, or they might not understand speech. It might take them a while to their brain to process certain words. So it kind of carries case by case again. And you just have to be patient and do your research on how to handle certain cognitive disabilities and physical disabilities, because one person might be slow in some areas and one person might be able to keep up or be as good as a regular person without a disability.
I have a question. So does how like physical disability and cognitive disability, they both have certain ways of therapy, right, to manage it? Do you think like physical therapy, like it's physical, but like cognitive therapy, like if you have ADHD, do you guys see that as a disability or no? Like, do you think like therapy really works or no? Or it's the way you manage it?
I'll let Mario speak on that one.
Yeah, it's a great question. Never really thought about that. Personally, for someone that doesn't really not the biggest fan with therapy, and also having issues with communication. That's more on the autism side. Struggling with communication. How do we, as individuals, like going back with with people with ADD, how do we improve those certain skills so they'll be able to function, like physical therapy that will strengthen the physical muscles? I would probably say have those individuals in regular settings, social settings, pick up on what's okay to say, what's not okay to say, put them in a safe environment. That's how I personally learned to communicate. I was put in Boy Scouts, I was put in soccer, I was in school a lot of the time. So I learned a lot of things of what was okay to say. And then I found out there are some things that were okay to say, just not in the right, and not in certain areas.
Oh, so it was mostly like your social setting more than your like therapy, right?
Yes, most definitely.
I think as you get older, I think once you reach that age of like 7 or 8, you start to realize like you have to your personality is molded by what you're doing at home, who you're socializing at home, and then you're brought to school for 8 hours, and you're forced to be into a situation that you're foreign with. So with people who have a disability, you kind of have to make yourself do things you kind of don't understand and maybe you don't want to do because you've been sheltered in a way. So what I would do for people who have a disability in any sort of matter is just kind of experience different situations so your brain can process, oh, is this something I like, or is this something that makes me uncomfortable? And then you can ask yourself as you get older, do you want to keep getting better at socializing? Do you want to keep getting better at being professional or acting a certain way depending on the situation? It all starts when we grow up at home. How we were raised by our parents really can possibly determine how we're going to act as adults. And it's as we get to adulthood, you decide how do you want to improve your mental state, your physical state. That's really up to you. So it all comes down to how you process the situation in that moment, because certain moments can happen where it can go really bad and it can traumatize you, or it can feel really good and make your life much more easier as you are presented with those situations.
Definitely. You mentioned environment. That's a huge aspect. So if you look into psychology or even child development, there are several theorists that mention environment. Yuri Broffer is a huge advocate for children and how they grow into an environment. If you grow up in a negative environment, it's going to be difficult to grow successfly. Then you add on to a child that has a disability. And like you mentioned, Rovan, many of these kids are going to school about 8 hours a day, trying to take in everything on top of speech, on top of all these other life skills they need to have. So a lot of these kids are behind, and they're trying to catch up to, you could say, like societal norms. It's a lot to take in, physically and mentally. Wouldn't y'all agree?
Yeah, I feel like the goal that people have for disabilities is that you're trying to be more independent. Try not to be, like in the beginning. I feel like the way you guys, it's because the way you guys manage disabilities. At first, you need like a little help, and at the, the goal is to be independent and be like, okay, I can manage my own.
I think that goes on for everybody if you even don't have a disability. Yeah. For me, being 25, I still feel like I need my independence, but I also want that validation. Like, hey, you're doing a good job, or you're doing as good as your other employees or your friends. And because everybody wants that validation, even if you do or don't have that disability, you want that sense of independence, because that's the best part of life. Is like, hey, you could do this on your own. Those are one of the things that I think everybody wants to accomplish.
Definitely, we all want that little bit of that golden sticker once in a while. With that being said, we'll probably go into our final question. How, we've mentioned it a little bit though, want to elaborate a little more on it. How much of an impact does environment play when it comes to an individual with a physical disability and an individual with a cognitive disability?
For me, my environment, I think growing in an Asian family has kind of really sheltered me in a way. Depending financially, I think for me, everything was kind of more given to me, and everything was more like, hey, if you need anything, my parents are not afraid to help me. You know, especially with my disability, it's just like they're really not afraid to help me. Like if they said, like, if you need anything, like they'll just give it to me. And I feel like that's like prepared me to like grow up a little bit slower than other people who have those kind of parents that are a little bit, hey, you got to be independent a little bit sooner. Like as soon as you're 18. I felt like for me, I felt a sense of independence till 22, so 21, because I started working videography for a basketball organization. And then that's when I started getting money. And then like, oh, cool, I can earn my own money. And this job's pretty easy. I'm not moving around a lot. I'm just sitting down recording a basketball game. And I was like, man, I can really do this. And I'm like, oh, just because I have a disability, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be doing nothing and just collecting checks or something, like disability checks, or depending on my parents. And I know my parents were happy about that. And then, you know, as you get older, you start exploring different paths of careers or different jobs, and you understand what you like. I think for me, I think everyone here can say you kind of been told, oh, what do you want to do in life? And they tell you, oh, you should be a doctor. That's like the typical stereotype for like most Asians. You have to be a doctor in medical field, or you have to be like in the same social like career path as like the norm, like being a business person, staying in the office and doing computer work. And for me, I didn't want to do that. I think having my disability makes me different. And I felt like that put a little pressure on myself that I have to be a little bit different, because I never really liked going to school. I don't like sitting in class learning about something that I could like look up on the internet. I think I understood that I have a lot of control more than I thought. I had little control when I was a kid, because I thought I was going to be a doctor, or I was going to be a business person. But I think my disability has kind of shaped me into the person that I'm not sure who I'm becoming. That's the cool thing about life, is that like there's not really a set path, no matter who you are, disability or not. I just think people need to treat people with respect. If you have a disability or not, you just have to be kind. And if you have questions about any disability, about a person, just for me, I wouldn't say just ask for me. Like, I don't mind it now, but as a kid, I didn't understand it till I was like 12 or 13, where like, man, that question really like hurts my feelings. Oh, like why do I walk a certain way? Why you don't walk like straight? Why do you bend your knees, or why you don't have your back straight, or something like that? Kids would always ask me that, and it would kind of not really take a toll on me, because I was like 6 to like 8 or 9, and I didn't understand that like those words can hurt people. I didn't understand that. I thought that was a normal question, but as a kid, I was always quiet. And then as I got older, I would speak a little bit more through like high school, and then college, I would just kind of just like be in the middle about it, because I was also doing YouTube and stuff like that. So I was trying to put myself out there to be more comfortable in front of a camera. And I felt like during that time, I have improved on that. I haven't done like YouTube videos in a while, but I'm happy for that experience, but I think we just got to view disability as more just kind of is. There's not really a label we should put on somebody because it's kind of an unknown.
I have a question. So, do you think so when people that have disabilities, when they don't have that family or friend support, do you think the government does enough to support them?
If I remember correctly, you do get SSI benefits from a certain age. I got benefits when I was probably 16 or 17. So as we kind of dove in a little bit through my disability, it varies case by case. So usually you would get those benefits from elementary school to high school. But since my disability wasn't as severe, I only got disability money through maybe a couple of months when I was 17 before I was turned 18. And then the government would send you a letter if you want to continue your benefits. And then you have to go to a doctor appointment where they kind of test you on your cognitive skills and your mental skills. And that doctor determines if you get those benefits. Like, oh, you're labeled as not as disabled, or yes, you do have cerebral palsy, but it's not as severe. So it does, that qualification of getting those financial benefits determines on that doctor's evaluation. So that's the only help I know. As a child, I think you are required to go to physical therapy. And then at the age of 18, you have a decision to make. Since you're a legal adult, you have a decision to make if you want to continue that physical therapy, if it's helpful or not. In my case, I didn't continue my physical therapy. I actually didn't really do it a lot as a kid because I didn't really feel like, I felt like I could walk normally. I felt like I could do almost everything a normal person does. Yeah, for me, I'm not as flexible on my left side of my body than to my right, but it didn't really hinder my physical ability. Or mentally, I felt like I was just I didn't really like any math. So that was more, I just don't want to do this kind of thing instead of more of a mental disability. So again, it just comes down to case by case basis for benefits, for financial benefits wise. Honestly don't know what else that the government is doing to help disabled people. So
I feel like sorry to cut you off, Robin, but to piggyback on that, does the government help out enough? Yes, and at the same time, no. Like how you mentioned, Robin, we need to take quite a number of tests to qualify for these benefits, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, how do you say it? This is kind of how my brain's thinking, that the government determines what is considered a disability. Maybe that's just kind of how I'm seeing it. Like, even though we can do certain capabilities, because we can do one thing much better than normal humans, that disqualifies us to how would you say it? Receive certain benefits.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know, because when I think about it, it'd be cool to have an extra couple $100 in my pocket every month. But everybody's it just, man, because my case is so different. But if you talk to somebody else who's in a wheelchair and not talking, they definitely deserve it more than me. And see that word deserve, there's an umbrella that it falls under. And are you able to walk? Are you able to talk? Are you able to lift 50 pounds? That typical work application of are you able to do the duties that are assigned to this job? And for me, when I look at those job applications, I do say yes. And I bring up I've been a year, almost 2 years ago, I've been in a car accident. That's been a problem for the last 2 years. I have my disability. And I feel I don't think employers understand disability, and I think they need to be kind of educated on not all disabilities are going to be the same. You don't know if somebody's on the spectrum. You don't know if somebody has ADHD or cerebral palsy or any other mental or physical disability. And I think a lot of employers and our government, they lack the education that not everyone's there's not a set model disability. There's like so many categories that you can go into. Like, just because someone can do, like you were saying, one thing as good as a normal human being, that doesn't mean like they're not a normal person, but they also have a disability. It's just because luck, I would assume luck would be kind of how you were born. I mean, no one knows like how you're going to be born, if you're going to be, if your brain's going to be wired correctly, if your limbs are going to be perfectly human. It's just very complicated to label somebody disabled, because and then you have to decide, our government has to decide, oh, does this person deserve benefits because they can do XYZ, but this person, they can't walk or talk. So it's just like, it's a very frustrating system. It's something that it definitely needs to be fixed, obviously, because there might be a lot of people who are in my situation where they can talk, they can walk, dress themselves, go to school, go to work, and they might not be able to get a job because they might not be able to do that one thing that could disqualify them from not getting a job. But the fact that that person who might have a disability looks too normal, in a sense, that could also disqualify them from getting benefits. So it's like there has to be this kind of fine. There's like so much of a gray area that has to be fixed, and that's really frustrating for people who are in that umbrella where they have a disability and they can't get benefits. Like,
definitely. It's that gray area. There was a quote that popped up in my head. Is just society isn't a one size fit all. So why are individuals with disabilities treated like that?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember that there's like a photo on social media where there's like a fish, a giraffe, certain animals in a line, and they tell you to climb this tree. Obviously, whoever's like a good climber, let's say like a bear or like a lemur, they can climb that tree just fine. Then you got a fish. Well, obviously, it's not in its natural environment. Oh, you have a giraffe. Oh, it's super tall, it can reach that tree, but it can't climb that tree. So, what, like, the pedestal is so different. If you give let's say there's a tall fence and you want somebody to look over, you can't give someone the same crate to look over that fence. You have to depend on your height. One person might need something taller, one person might need something shorter, one person might need like a bar to stand on, because they might not be able to stand on it correctly and fall off. So we as a society need to kind of, I feel like the only way to do that is to literally a case-by-case basis. But the thing is, the doctor who is qualified to examine you makes that decision. And the doctor, by their degree and their expertise on certain disabilities, I think someone who specializes in certain disabilities, let's say cerebral palsy, should examine a person with cerebral palsy and be like, oh, if you can do this and this and this, then you should be qualified, or you should not be qualified. I'm totally fine like that. If a specialist would like examine me if I can do X, Y, and Z. I think another thing is that kind of your whole body is kind of connected as well. So you have to keep in factors of your daily life. If you can sleep well, that's something that also could be in consideration of how should we judge people with disability, so if they can qualify for benefits.
Right. Mostly we want to figure out, well, one thing we want to know, what is something that's holding them back? And ultimately, we want to know what are they capable of doing, and a good thing. And society is getting a lot better with that, with changing, we're focusing on the child rather than the disability. It's kind of discarding that label, like, oh, that child has autism, he's going to be all over the place. That child has cerebral palsy, so he's not able to move fast. Even though that's... Go on.
Yeah, I think employers are getting a little bit better at being more accommodating. I have been in situations where I've been offered to sit. I've been offered to sit during long shifts. For me, I denied it. I've had a job where we had to stand for 8 hours, and my coworker was about 70 or 80 years old. We asked for chairs because first off, I kind of felt bad for my employee because he's 70, 80 years old and he's just standing there. And it's just like, man, you really just gonna let him stand there? I mean, and then the reason we were trying to sell a vehicle, so the reason why they didn't give us chairs is because, it doesn't look like you're working. It doesn't look like you're energetic. I'm like, how does not sitting in a chair and standing make someone go up to a kiosk and say like, oh, they're lazy just because they're sitting? For me, I feel like it's best to accommodate somebody who has a disability or who has been physically drained of like working. If you're working till you're like 70 or 80, obviously your body's not going to be as mobile, or your cognitive or your mind skills are going to be not as well as normal people who are much younger than people who are 70 or 80 years old. So I think employers have been doing a good job. They can obviously be better at accommodating people with disabilities, because it's really hard for somebody, if they have my disability, cerebral palsy, to get a job, because you can't, like, there are cases where you physically can't move or talk, and it's just like, you've been dealt with this hand of having a certain disability, and now you can't do what a normal person does. And it's just more of it gives the family more stress. It gives the person with a disability more stress, and people have to deal with, like, specialists that have to deal with, like, what kind of research can they do to make this person feel like they're a normal person, like to walk and talk and stuff. And I think we're not too far away from learning how to combat that issue of people who have those kind of disabilities.
Definitely. We're slow and steady, though we have a long way to go. With that being said, we're about to wrap up this episode. So any final words, any motivation, words of encouragement y'all like to give?
For me, anybody who has a disability, find something you love, because it's pretty hard I think just for anybody to like kind of double down and find what you're passionate about, especially if you have a disability, and don't let your disability determine what you're going to do in life. I think a lot of people tend to jump the gun and be like, hey, just because you have a disability, you are not going to be as good. It's up to you to find out. You just have to work harder, and you'll get the energy and the work you put in. You're going to get the same results if you put that work in. So that's my 2 cents.
So mine is like a question and let's say, so do you think we should, like, well, of course, like, how should we spread awareness, like, to be more accepted and not label like people with disability, and see who the person really is and get to know them,
I think for me, if I were to talk to somebody who has a disability, I would just kind of ask them the typical, like, hey, how are you? My name is Rovan, and like, I've noticed that you walk kind of differently, or I've noticed you've been spacing out. that's how I would kind of do it, and kind of just read the situation. It really just comes down to a domino effect. Like if this person who might or may not have a disability, it just depends how they react. Back to spreading awareness, you just kind of have to be, first off, just be respectful. That's the best thing. That's the first step that we should do, is not really just call somebody out. Oh, like you have a disability and you make fun of them. That's something that we shouldn't do. We have to be respectful to everybody, no matter who they are, disability or not. For awareness, I guess for all of us, we just got to be more educated. That's something that we need to do too, because I don't think everybody understands like how many disabilities there are in this world. Like there's probably tons of them that I don't even know. And to spread up, for another step, maybe go talk to a professional doctor. Use the resources of your doctor, and maybe get yourself, like, if you are okay with being tested or being more open with your doctor about like, hey, there could be something wrong with me, and you want to understand like what's going on with your body and mind. That's another route, so you can get educated, and then you can understand what you have or what you don't have. So I think that's one of the many ways we all can spread awareness about how to treat people with disability.
Definitely spreading awareness, spreading acceptance is the big one too. A wise person once said, "We don't know what this." There was a parent that had a child with missing arms, missing limbs. Basically, they said, "We don't know what you're capable of. So the skies. There's no limit to what you can do." With that being said, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you guys for joining us and giving us your personal stories. It takes a lot, especially when you have something that you live with every day. And we greatly appreciate you, Rovan, and greatly appreciate you, Alberto.
I appreciate it, Mario. Much appreciated. Thanks for being. I love being on here, guys.
Thank you, Mario, for having me here.
Definitely appreciate you guys once again. For you guys watching, thank you. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. Like it, share it, pass a smile. Love your neighbor at the end of the day. With that being said, see you guys next time. Peace.